Christoph Schell. I see your video is on. There's your slide, but we don't need that anymore. So welcome. Christoph Schell is the Chief Commercial Officer at HP, which is the company that builds PCs and printers and printer supplies. And he's been with HP for a long time, worked all over the world with HP. But the reason he's here now is that, in particular, is that just this week, HP made some major announcements about its environmental commitments, which we will touch on in some detail in a minute. But it's not just that HP has made big environmental commitments, but HP as a company has made a corporate goal to be seen as the most just technology company in the world by 2030. So these environmental steps are a part of a bigger set of actions that the company is making in its move towards some kind of big picture justice in the corporate context. And I want to talk to Christoph also about what being just means. But first of all, Christoph, I think you should start by telling us in some detail what you announced this week and why it's important, and maybe how a little bit how it happened.
Yeah, I will try and do that, David. Firstly, thanks for having me and enduring my German accent here while we speak. I think you're absolutely right. For HP, we look at planet, people, and community. But what we announced this week under the umbrella of being the most just technology company by 2030 is actions that we're committing to take on carbon emissions, on circularity, and on forests. And basically what we committed to do was that HP will promote a circular economy by a whole gamut of activities, using more sustainable materials to design our product, expanding ongoing partnerships that we have. And I think that's a very important topic for us. We are operating in an ecosystem of other technology companies. We do over 85% of our revenue with channel partners. So bringing them into this thought and bringing them into this ecosystem is important for us. We want to invest in forest restoration and protection. We want to transition a core part of our system, supplies, ink and toner, to carbon neutral. And we're launching different business models that are more services oriented rather than just hardware usage oriented. One of these businesses that we have that is scaling quite well is called HP Instant Ink, so we can talk about that. So these are a couple of things that we're doing. For me, what is important is to have the customer at the center of all of these movements. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer of HP. I'm responsible for the customer. I'm responsible with my team for the value propositions that we bring to life with customers. And I think what is very important, and I think you said this, David, I've been living with HP all over the world, in Europe, in the Middle East, in Asia, Australia, New Zealand, and now in the US. And the amount of customers that are telling us that sustainability is important to them is just increasing year after year. We've closed last year as a company north of $1 billion of revenue based on our sustainability efforts, and something that we are tracking actively in the company. So at the heart of this is really our customer.
So you track that in your CRM. What deals are connected to, or what prospective deals could we get because of this? That's big part of the way you're operating as a team.
That very much has become that way. When I started to operate in Australia and New Zealand was for the first time. This is now, I'm dating myself, but this is a while ago. This was for the first time that we had in RFPs, in RFQs, chapters of the response that were targeted around, hey, what is HP's action around sustainability? How can you help us as a customer to drive sustainability forward? And I feel that this focus that I really first saw in Australia and New Zealand, I think it was also quite active in Northern Europe, that has haloed to all markets. And we have now really in most of our engagements with customers, that chapter in the response. We track it in our CRM, we track it in our funnel management tool. We by now actually have a dedicated team that helps our different sales teams to respond, to have target responses, but not only just to advance in an opportunity, but actually work hand in hand with the customers to tell them our own experience and to help them bringing their experiences to life. So it has become a real big part of our go-to-market efforts. And as I said, it's growing. It's growing every year. The last 12 months during the pandemic have fairly accelerated this. And so I do believe this is something that will stick with us and that will become a main differentiator in our go-to-market models.
Well, with the administration now really making its major announcements this week, you do have the wind at your back in a sense. If the nation as a whole is moving towards carbon neutrality first and net zero economy eventually, the fact that you have both of those goals for yourself is really important. But the thing that I also really think is smart, which you mentioned before, and more than smart, indispensable, and needs to be viewed much more universally this way, is that you're looking at your whole ecosystem, which in the case of HP is huge. And your ultimate goal is carbon neutral and ultimately net zero for the entire ecosystem, and everything you can do to help that giant community of companies and partners, which is hugely ambitious. I mean, this is a multi-decade project, no doubt.
It is. So let's quickly talk about what our commitments are. I'll give you a couple of examples of what we committed actually, and then let's talk about the ecosystem. So as I said before, there are really three pillars. On the carbon emission side, we have committed as a company that we want to have net zero or be net zero across our value chain by 2040. And we have put a stake in the ground that one of our key businesses, our supplies business, will be carbon neutral by 2030. And so for us, it's very important that in our own operation, we progress faster. So we want to be carbon neutral for HP operations by 2025, and then we continue across the value chain. We've also made commitments on circularity. We want to reach a zero waste in the HP operations by 2025. We want to reach 30% of recycled plastic content also by 25 and reach 75% of circularity for products and our packaging by 2030. I'll talk about packaging later on because there's also a business opportunity here for us. And then the third pillar is forests. We want to maintain a zero deforestation for our paper business and our packaging business, but also counteract for deforestation for non-HP paper that is used in products and print services by 2030. So that's what is happening within our own four walls. And we've given ourselves a little bit more ambitious timelines here because we want to prove to our ecosystem that it's possible. And the second layer is, so what can we do with the ecosystem? I already said that we do more than 85% of our business through partners. And I'm responsible for them. I manage them with my team. And we have a channel program for our go-to-market partners. It's called HP Amplify. And we launched a new chapter within HP Amplify. It's called HP Amplify Impact. And what we do here is, it's a first of its kind partner program that gives a partner the ability for us to assess their capability when it comes to sustainability, to provide resources to them, to provide training to them. We think it's a really important vision to have to rope the entire ecosystem into this effort because we can't do this by ourselves. And I think it would be incomplete if we would just look at the four walls of HP. Today, we actually have 1,000 partners that signed up for it. It's voluntary right now, but I actually could think that we make this a little bit more mandatory as we go forward in order to really drive adoption. And our goal is to work with our partners to help them drive and help them learn. It's also cool for us to get feedback and learn from them. Many of them have really awesome ideas and awesome established processes that we want to take over. So as usual, between HP and the partners, it's a bit like a family. And so we want to bring them to this. What I'm thrilled about is how enthusiastic they have been embracing it since we announced it a couple of months ago. And as I said, we have already 1,000 partners signed up.
Well, continually talking about the ecosystem is so critical. And I reiterate, I think more companies have to be thinking in those terms. But you went quickly over something that many people might find shocking in itself. You said you were going to maintain zero deforestation in your paper and packaging. So you are already at zero deforestation for all the paper goods that you distribute yourselves.
Yes, and we want to continue that.
I ran across that as I didn't talk to you about it on the phone the other day, but how did you do that real fast?
Real fast. I mean, look, it doesn't happen from one day to another. Okay, this has been in
I don't
our.
mean you did it fast. I just want you to explain it fast.
We didn't do it. No, look, it was an incremental effort. Okay, over many years, and it required us. It required an ecosystem approach here as well with our suppliers. Okay, we are not manufacturing the paper ourselves. We are going through ODMs, and I think selecting these ODMs, having the right criteria to do that, promoting it with our customers as well to make sure that there's actually a perceived customer value was important, and is something that has developed over many years.
Yeah, so recycling is obviously a central piece of that. And there's probably a whole bunch of other pieces.
Absolutely.
You know, one of the things you'll see that I'm wearing my 17 SDGs pin, and here at Techonomy, we've been wearing these pins and talking about the SDGs for 4 or 5 years now. Although it's sometimes an uphill battle to really emphasize the SDGs in a business technology context where we live. But I know that you at HP are thinking very much about these efforts we're doing, and I want to get to the justice part, the justness part, but as very closely connected to the SDGs. So talk about how HP thinks about the SDGs in its work.
Define SDGs for me. What do you mean by that?
Well, the Sustainable Development Goals the UN has laid out for 2030, 17 goals for the planet that are concrete goals to achieve, zero poverty, climate action. There's a whole bunch of wonderful goals that are almost all very challenging to achieve. Many of them involve environment, of course.
That's correct. So look, I think what is important for us, and we talked a little bit about this when we briefed, one thing for us is we've always believed in the Paris Agreement, and we have been using that as a North Star, obviously thriving to try and move faster than what the guidelines are. One, I think, intelligent way of doing this is to goal ourselves on it as a company, but also goal individuals on it from an executive point of view. And that's actually what I see happening, not just in companies like HP, but I see this in my customer base as well. And I do believe that management by objectives is a very important part of the puzzle here. We need to be able to track it. We need to be able to really create personal interest. Many people are self-motivated to do this, but not all. And I think it's important that you create that awareness with anything that you got. And I think an MBO, at least in my experience, has been a very positive way of doing that. And that's what I see happening at a customer level as well. That's the reason why it becomes part of their procurement efforts. That's why it becomes part of the selection efforts, also within our ecosystem. So that's important to me.
But MBO, managing by objective, meaning that the executives at your customers are given better bonuses if they do more sustainable things, in part, right?
I think that's one way of looking at it. Some companies do this via bonuses. Other companies do this by talking about what people achieve. There's a lot of of credit that can be given by celebrating success in internal communications, and I think all of this is important to create a culture that is just, a culture that is focused on sustainability.
Right. Okay. We've been appropriately for Earth Day talking very much about environmental actions and sustainability. Let's go up a level to the whole issue of being a just company more broadly, which of course involves a whole lot of other things than just environmental and climate action. Why is HP talking about that? And what does being a just company mean to HP?
So as I said, the three pillars for us are people, planet, and also the product that we cover. We obviously have a lot of focus on sustainability, but I think we equally have a lot of focus on diversity and inclusion. I think being a foreigner living in the US, the last 12 months have been very intense and have been very important. But having lived also all around the world, I can tell you that diversity and inclusion is a topic anywhere you go. It takes different nuances, it takes different cultures and different local flavors to it, but it is important. And I said this before, I am the Chief Commercial Officer. I have a very diverse set of customers around the globe. And in order to really be meaningful and be credible, you need to reflect diversity in your actions. You need to reflect diversity in the teams that we hire. You need to be able to adapt and to adjust to a local context, to understand it, not to fake it, to understand it, to be locally relevant. And I think that's important to us. And I think I look at the sustainability efforts that we take and our focus on diversity and inclusion. There is a huge overlap, and there's a huge consistency in how you drive behavior, how you drive change across both of them. I love listening to the previous speaker because it's very genuine. And I do believe that there's a lot of things that we can learn. And I think both camps, the diversity and inclusion camp and the sustainability camp, there's a lot of overlap in efforts and driving it forward together.
Right. Well, taking a systemic view ends up covering up a lot of sins and opening up a lot of opportunities and helping give an intuitive sense of what is the right direction more broadly. There's two things I want to touch on before we wrap, which we have to do fairly shortly. One is some of the counterintuitive things that you have discovered in doing this work, that, you know, on what is sustainable and what isn't, some of the things that maybe people think is good but really isn't, but also what is going to be the hardest part for HP in moving toward being a just company, or even just one really hard thing?
I'll give you a couple of learnings. I think for me, a dialogue that I'm having a lot in the last 12 months is, hey, Christoph, because of the pandemic, you're not traveling as much. I'm sure that that helps really with driving your sustainability efforts. Guys, the reality is that's true. It helps with the carbon footprint reduction not to travel. But do we actually all understand what the carbon footprint is that we generate through virtual meetings like this? The heat that gets created through the server farms that are required to have this Zoom call here, for example. Very important not to make this too simple, okay? And to really understand it end to end. And I think that is important, okay? That doesn't mean that we will start traveling like we did prior to the pandemic. I think we should really use this opportunity here to think how we want to operate. And that is maybe now the business opportunity, David. And I want to talk a little bit about that. I think hybrid workforce, for example, is going to be a result for many companies coming out of this pandemic. And a hybrid workforce for me means that we will have offices where our employees get together. But we don't expect our employees to get together every day. We will get them into an office in order to collaborate, to be creative together. In HP, we have coffee talks. That's part of our culture. That's all good. But then when individual work needs to be done, employees can do that from home. In order to make that real, the products and services that a company like HP has to deliver is going to change. We're going to be more focused on subscriptions. We're going to be more focused on workflows. If you print a page at your home, it's going to be important for the CIO of your company whether that page is printed for the business or whether that page is maybe printed for the homework of your kids, okay? These are all product and workflow opportunities that we didn't think about prior to the pandemic. Now we are, and I think that's an opportunity. There are opportunities as we look into how we think about install base and refreshing of the install base. We launched, for example, very early on a product that we call HP Refresh. And we launched this early on into the pandemic because we saw an opportunity to use used equipment, in particular around notebooks and desktops, wipe all the information on them and make them cloud books, give them to students to have access to education without having to buy a new product, okay? Basically without refreshing the install base, but re-establishing the install base as something that can be used in a safe and secure environment. And so products like that are going to be very important. This has a huge impact on our portfolio and how we think about our portfolio. Now, what is going to be difficult in this environment? It's a huge change. It's a huge change in how you engage with customers. You're going from transactional engagement to outcome-based engagements. It's a huge change in how you think about talent in your companies. For us, there's a shift from hardware engineers to software and workflow engineers. And so you need to manage all of that in the offering with your customers. When we do this correctly, when we do this with diverse talent, and we do this with sustainability at the center of everything that we do, and then we will win. But it's heavy lifting. It's a very big change management.
Well, Christoph, thank you so much. I hope you're going to be able to rejoin us afterward for our VIP and member session. I know we talked to your team about that, because I know on Earth Day, a lot of people are going to want to talk to you about some of the more ins and outs of this incredible move that HP is making, and one that I think we need to really celebrate, which we are doing by having you here today. So thank you so much. And we will stay in touch in many ways, I'm sure.
Thank you, David. Thanks for having me.